last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host Ken Miller. Ken, how's it going?
It's going great. No complaints, Wendy. How you doing?
I am great. And today's topic is the future you starts now. And we're going to talk a little bit about backcasting and what it is and how this strategy begins with your future self. So Ken, why don't you kick us off? Talk a little bit about backcasting and how this whole podcast came about. And then we'll dive deeper in the content.
Well, it was a merging of different things that were happening about the same time. First thing is, I just had a strategy call with a potential client. And one of the standard questions that I ask with my clients is, okay, we get you to your goals. Whatever the situation is, you lose weight, you have more endurance, you're stronger. One of my questions is, okay, when you hit your goals 2 months, 3 months, a year from now, what do you want to be able to do? Right. So a lot of times trainers, when we talk to clients, we'll talk about, okay, here's how we're going to start. We're going to assess you. You're going to start here and you're going to do this, and then you'll be wherever you are. But what I ask my clients is, what do you want to be able to do or say, or what do you want to be able to be capable of once we've done everything that you need to do with stability, strength, and power? So I kind of get them thinking about, okay, a year from now, what do you want to be able to do? What do you want to be able to say? What do you want to be capable of? So with this idea, with backcasting, I want to think about now, when I'm 90, which is 40 some years from now, what do I want to be able to do? I want to be able to climb upstairs. I want to be able to play with my grandchildren. God willing, I'll will the lifespan will actually go that far. But if I want to be able to go to Disneyland, which might mean walking 5-6 miles at the age of 90, what do I have to do, or what do I want to be able to say at 90 that I did at 55, that I did at 60, that I was doing then, that brought me to the point of being 90 years old and still being interactive, having my wits about me, right? That's number one for me. But when you backcast, basically you project yourself into the future. And from there, you look back and you have to think about, okay, what did I do step by step when it came to exercise, nutrition, and everything to be able to be capable at 90 years old for whatever that situation may be. But the other part of it is that I went to the bookstore with my daughter and looking for books for her, but then we came across The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which we've done a podcast on that topic. And I just remember looking through the beginning part of the book and it said, start with the end in mind. So going into that call that I had with that potential client and going into the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is like, where do I want to be? Where do I see myself later on? And then reverse engineer. So when I look back as a 90-year-old or 85-year-old, whatever the situation may be, then I have to look at, okay, well, these are the things that I would have had to do to be able to say that at 90 years old.
Well, and I think it's important too, because I have said this multiple times. Ken, I know you probably said it within your lifetime. And if you guys are listening to this, you have probably thought this or heard this from someone else. Well, if I would have done that when I was younger, then I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in today. So for example, I work a lot with tennis teams, collegiate tennis teams, to be more specific. And I hear people say, if I would have taken the time, or if I would have learned about foam rolling and stretching and doing these particular exercises that you've given to me when I first started playing tennis, I may not have had to have PRP, or I may not have had to have my knee cleaned out or scoped. I wish I would have known that, in my early years. And so when you started talking about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hear that all the time. And we know as we get older, we lose things a lot quicker. So if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I think the number one thing to start with is it's all about you looking truly at yourself and being proactive and thinking to yourself, what is it that you want to do? And what are the actions that you're going to have to take? And I think as we dive deeper into some of our things that we're doing, Ken, I think it's something that everybody hopefully is able to relate to, because unfortunately we're all getting older, Ken, all of us.
Fortunately, we are getting it, because what's the alternative?
Right. Well, when you keep talking about 90, I'm like, gosh, if I could just hit 70, I mean, I'm going to start, that's my goal right now. And then as I, start to get closer to that number, I'm going to hopefully move it back. But yeah, 90 might be a push with my history of my family history. So
fingers crossed, Wendy, fingers
That's
crossed
funny.
we crossed that threshold. But I mean, I guess that's part of why we're talking about what we're talking about. So if we're have big goals, right? Shoot for the stars. And even if you don't hit the stars, you're going to hit the moon, is what I like to tell my clients. So just dream big, aim big. And then if you don't get it, at least you tried, but you're still going to go farther than if you just don't do anything different. So when I was first taking my notes on this, Wendy, and thinking again, 90 years old, my kids may have they may have kids, so I might have grandchildren at that time. So as an idea, even kind of shorter term, like if I'm getting into more of my 60s, mid 60s, and my son plays baseball right now and my daughter plays volleyball, and I'm trying to be interactive with them in their two respective sports. But for me, just even backcasting from 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when you look at those sports, if I'm hitting grounders to my son, if he's playing shortstop or second base, I hit grounders, or I even just throwing the ball, playing catch with him, I need a little extra time to warm up. So before we even walk out the door, I'm doing shoulder mobility, I'm foam rolling a little bit. I'm actually getting a good 15-20 minute movement prep session just to work with him now. So giving my body what it's going to be 10-15 years from now, that's going to mean a lot more foam rolling, like you already brought up with tennis. But if I'm throwing, the dynamics of throwing, having the mobility, the strength, and the power, because as he's getting stronger, Wendy, he's stepping farther back, he's stepping farther and farther back, and he's throwing harder, which means, guess what? I've got to throw that much harder myself. So now, as I think about, 10-15 years from now, if I'm still throwing the ball to him, I've got to be more progressive, not just with my warm-ups, but with my resistance training. So having more progressions when it comes to shoulder work, when it comes to being able to rotate and turn my body. These are things that after I started taking notes on this one day, I realized how much rotation I do not do in my workouts, right? So again, thinking back, if I'm projecting myself to be 85 years old and looking back, if I want to throw a ball or throw anything, I have to get that much more rotation, not just in my shoulder, but also in my torso and in my hips. So I've already started thinking about, okay, what am I not doing now, which is mobility work and strength and power work in rotation. I do plenty for my clients, as I know you do, Wendy, but I don't do it enough for myself. That's one thing I realized here.
Well, and I think as you're thinking about, important to, like I said, you're going to have to be proactive. And like you said, Ken, you need to think, what is it that you want to do? If it's a particular sport, then I think it's also important that you've got to prioritize different movements, like you said, in your workout or what you're doing now, in order to maximize the output that you're going to get. And it's going to get harder as you age. However, based on the SAID principle, which is you get what you train for, right? If you're doing something and it becomes easier for you and you can maintain that even though it's an exercise, yes, we can change directions and change weight and everything like that. But if you've got the ability to move and rotate and flex your arms and move your hips with ideal range of motion, you're going to limit the chances of getting injured, but it's also going to help the longevity because you're not stressing the joints. You're not putting increased pressure somewhere where it shouldn't be. And I think that's what's important, because for me, I love to play tennis. And when I went out and just saw these tennis players hit, I mean, I was like, man, I realized I'm nowhere close to these guys. I mean, yes, they're playing college. They're a lot younger than me. But then I'm like, well, how can I be them within the next, like by the end of the year? What do I have to do? Well, of course, the end of the year is like in a month. So that ain't gonna happen. So like end of next year, what can I do to become more powerful, to become more explosive? And then how do I maintain that throughout the longevity of me playing tennis? And I see women out playing for fun in their 80s and they're not getting hurt. They love it. I mean, they're super skilled. So they may not be running and diving for balls that I might do now. But to your point, I think it's important to break down, like, okay, even if it's that you just want to, like you mentioned, Disney, going to Disneyland or Disney World, if you're more towards the East Coast, there are a lot of steps that you're going to have to do. There's a lot of ramps. So there's going to be inclines and declines. You're getting in and out of different types of rides. If you're getting into a roller coaster, just like you're getting in and out of a car. So you've got to look at the primary muscles that you need to use and maintain the strength, and the joints need to maintain the stability in order to handle these type of movements without falls. And we already talked about osteoporosis and how, like, unfortunately more people get it as you age, and you can't get it back, right? Once you kind of lose it, it's really hard to maintain it. And I'm going to use my dad as the example. He's 84. He played golf every single day and had his noon group. I've talked about him a ton. And when he went to help his wife who got sick and he stopped playing, he can't play anymore, Ken. Like if he rotates like that, he's going to fall. So the one thing that he loved to do, he gave up for his wife, which is the right thing to do. But at the same time, he lost something that, he's really struggling to get back.
Yeah. And the idea of Disneyland, I think if we look at, okay, well, what's something that, again, if you are a family oriented person and you are, if you have kids, and the idea of having your kids having kids is on Disneyland's a great, because I bounced this topic off of my clients and we talked about it. But if you have Disneyland as one of the end goals, if you want to be able to have a day, the average steps per trip to Disneyland, Wendy, is about 20,000 steps. So if I'm 80 years old, 90 years old, and I need to walk 20,000 steps, what do I need to do as a 50-something-year-old to be able to 35, 40 years from now be able to do that? Well, I need to run. I need to build a big base. So you talk about bone density, you need to build that up and keep it up as long as you can. So we can talk the same thing about your cardiorespiratory fitness. So that's not just be able to have endurance to run 45 minutes to an hour, but it's also about having the leg strength. So something we don't talk about too much when it comes to the active aging, but being able to sprint. So Wendy, you're talking about tennis, right? That's a bunch of short sprints, agility, changing directions. So as we get older, we need to have that good cardiorespiratory fitness, that endurance, being able to be strong and powerful, because as we get older, we lose muscle, right? Sarcopenia. So we're losing muscle, we're losing strength. And with the loss of strength, we're also losing power. So just to account for what you're going to lose over the natural aging process, I think the point we're trying to make here is that you're building a pool, you're building your reservoir of conditioning, strength, and power to account for that aging process. So if we build it up now, we're going to have a little bit of runway so that when it comes to having to walk that 20,000 steps a day, then, we should be able to meet that demand because we've done such a good job from the age of 50 to the age of 80 or 90.
100%. That's where we start talking about the 30-year plan, right, Ken? But before we
Yeah.
kind of dive deeper into that plan, I wanted to say that this episode of Random Fit is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. So get the Edge app to schedule and program clients, enjoy half off all certifications and specializations, access to free CEUs, and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So, Ken, the 30-year plan, when you're thinking about it and we're thinking backwards. So for me, if I start thinking about my 30-year plan now, because again, I'm not even shooting for 90, but I am shooting high. I think it's important to start scheduling, take out a piece of paper, write down we always tell people you should know what your goals are. What are your long-term goals and your short-term goals? And think, write what you want to do in a year, 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years. And 10 years seems like such a stretch. But to your point, if you have children and you hope that they have grandchildren, I would love to be able to take care of my grandkids and tell my son, I want you to go and take a week with your wife, leave your child with me and let me take care of him, and then show him the week of his life. That's what grandparents are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to spoil them, feed them, and do all the fun stuff that they may not be able to do with parents that may be strict. So I think, like you said, when you want to focus on what you're doing in your 50s, based on what we know about age, the way that we know that our body begins to break down starting around 50, unless we maintain good strength, mobility, and balance, which you said, I think if we kind of break down how you should schedule your workouts, like if you do strength training 3 days a week and you lift as heavy as you can control with ideal form. So again, you're going to make sure that you're foam rolling, you're stretching, you're going into the gym, you're doing things the right way. You're not just moving at a fast tempo. It's very specific of your movement patterns and the quality of each and every rep that you do. And then you focus on more compound type exercises. So more, integration of multiple joints. So something like the squat to row, maybe start working on some of your balance in there. So balance component is going to be extremely important. And maybe it's just a day of just balance work, whether you're in the gym or at home. But then you also need to think too about, your cardio, like you said, being able to go for walks, walk on different terrains. My neighborhood is very hilly. So certain days I would walk more of a harder path. And other days when I don't have enough time, I take a shorter route that might be a little more flat, but then I challenge myself for time. And then I think if we start that in our 50s, then we can think what happens in your 60s, right? So in your 60s, again, we want to maintain your muscle endurance, cardiovascular health, your flexibility is going to be important. And I don't think that flexibility gets enough credit of how important it is, because you're only going to be as strong as you are stable. And if you're lacking range of motion and you go to reach for something, you're going to have more of a time rehabbing an injury when you're older than you are when you're younger. So I think 2 days a week, I think, focusing on that, doing moderate type cardio, still challenging yourself, at least 2 days of strength training, 2 days specifically on flexibility. I mean, Ken, that's just thinking about 50s and 60s. And if you're retired, then maybe you also start picking up pickleball or golf or something like that, something that you enjoy that gets you outside.
Right. Exactly. And you're listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, talking about the future you starts now. And the idea is that we are backcasting. So if you just started listening in, talking about training 60s and 70s, but the idea is that, Wendy, to your point, when you bring up pickleball, that's the fastest growing sport in America, especially amongst the active aging population. So my wife, she's playing pickleball now. She picked it up a few months ago, more than a few months ago. But one of the things that she tells me is that she is she's like middle of the ground age wise, but there is a larger set of people there that are she would say 15, 20 plus years older than her, right? Short court, smaller court, ball's not as reactive as a tennis ball, but they're covering a lot of ground. They're stopping, changing direction. They have the agility. They have to have the hand-eye coordination to play the sport. All the good things that contribute to aging well, right? The hand-eye coordination, especially in the shorter sprints. But it can be a cardiorespiratorily commanding or demanding sport. So as you are getting there, that's where, as you're talking about, Wendy, with flexibility and mobility, reaching that paddle towards the ball, changing direction, maybe you have to take a little bit bigger step than you would do in your day-to-day. So that mobility part, but being able to, so a lot of what we're talking about now is kind of maintaining, but every research study out there that I've come across when it comes to active aging doesn't mean that you can't improve, right? So whatever the situation may be as far as your baseline goes, but if you work at it, if you work on your strength, you work on your mobility, work on speed and agility, those things can improve. Right. They're not going to improve much depending on where you're coming, but for some people, if you're going from zero, anything is an improvement when it comes to being in 60s and 70s and starting a routine. Never too late to start. But I guess the point here is looking back, what do you want to be able to do? What do you want to be able to say you're able to do today? But looking back, what do you have to do to get to that point?
Mm-hmm. And my aunt, like I told you, she's in her late
Mm-hmm.
80s and she goes and does line dancing. She sits down with her seniors and goes to the senior activity clubs twice a week. She is super active in her community. She still drives. She still talks. She is probably, when we walk together, if we're walking in somewhere, she's always ahead of us. Like, she
Mm-hmm.
walks very quickly. And she's been very fortunate not to have any issues of falling. And when she goes to her doctor, they're like, your bone density, your ability, obviously it's not what she was when she was in her 50s, but she's able to do anything that she wants to do. She can still travel. She can still carry her luggage. She can still, she's more cautious, but it's one of those things like I that's my goal. Like she's my goal. And I'm like, but I know every single day she does something. And even when she's sick, she's like, I just can't sit here in a rocking chair and just wait for my life to pass by me. I've got to get up. I've got to take care of this. And she does. And she lives by herself. She still owns a 3-bedroom house, cleans it herself, does everything herself, cooks 3 meals a day for herself. And I think, it's just she's making herself a priority and always has. Especially since her husband passed at a really young age and she never remarried. So she kept saying, I don't want someone to have to take care of me. I want to be able to do this. And that's her when she was thinking long term. Okay, I don't have someone that's going to be doing this for me. I don't want someone to have to do this for me. And I don't want to inconvenience my children. And so it was one of those things that she's like, okay, I need to start this journey now. And she had been active ever since I've been born. And so it's one of those things that it just goes to show the importance. But I asked her a long time ago, why this? Like, why line dancing? Why are you doing that? And she's like, you know what? It's fun. I'm out talking to people and being around my friends and having that community of sport. But she's like, I used to journal everything. And she's like, and when I started to see that I was kind of getting myself in a slump, I got myself out by joining different types of community events. And she's like, my little senior class, she's like, I'm one of the oldest ones in there, but I'm lifting my 5 pounds like I own those. And I just love it. That's it. So I think starting now, journaling yourself out, where do you want to be? And then thinking about the actions that you have to take to get to those goals starting now. I think that's where you should start. And that's why I always say be proactive in yourself first. But if you don't have the goal and you don't really think about what you need to do it, then it's never going to work.
So that was one of my questions for you, Wendy. Like how long your aunt has been keeping up with that lifestyle to where she's able to do all the things she's able to do today. And you said she's been doing that since you can remember.
Oh yeah. I know that because he passed like when I was really young, and, she kept thinking, okay, I've got 2 daughters that I need to raise on my own, get them through college. Now they're all married. They all have, they have kids that are now going to college, and she's been around
Wow.
for, for all of it, all the grandparents' days, all the different events, goes to all the sporting events, didn't miss anything that the grandkids did because she had the time. But she was one of those people that her mindset, and it's also, I hear this for many people that are aging, I don't want to inconvenience my children, and I
Mhm.
don't want to be put in a home. So it's not even taking a trip to Disneyland. They just
Yeah,
don't want to be
yeah,
in a home. So it's like, okay, so they're like, I have to go for a walk every day. They walk in the, they're not in the snow or ice or anything,
yeah, yeah.
but even in the rain, she's like, I went for my walk today and I got rained on, but she's like, I got to go get my hair done. So
Right.
it's the little things. Yeah.
The little things. And that's a great example. Like we talk about, if you talk about traveling and, to get onto a plane, right? And I see it all the time. And this is half the reason why I sit next to the aisle is because there's so many people that are coming on the plane. They can't put their luggage in the overhead bin.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things where I find myself helping more people than anything else. I mean, I like the aisle seat just because I have the at least one arm. I'm not going to have to compete with the person next to me for that armrest. But from the vantage point of, okay, well, if I see somebody that needs some help, I'll help when I can. And you can tell, right, Wendy? Like the second they grab that handle, and are they doing a lot of shrugging, and are they are they they have to, post it on their knee and then do a little push press to get it up there. So it's like, I don't want this falling on anybody.
Mhm.
But that's the thing, right? Do you have the strength to pick up the things you need to pick up if you want to travel? Just getting on and off the plane. I don't know how many people I see now. I mean, it's always been there, right? People that need the wheelchair assistance getting on and off the plane, but just the mobility. If you've got the window seat and you need that assistance to get off the plane, just to get out of your chair. And from that standpoint, again, if you're keeping up with, as you get into your 70s and 80s, you are getting some kind of training. Well, I mean, we'll call it training for the sake of exercise sake. But the key there is still to do something every day. So you might have your harder workout days. So maybe for your aunt, it's maybe a longer walk. But maybe on the days that you're not working out or your off days, you do more recovery days. So we're saying don't not do anything, just do something that has a different purpose, which is, okay, I'm a little sore, my legs are a little tired, but still keep moving because it still enhances blood flow, and from that standpoint, the recovery process. So how you mix up what you do on top of the intensity, you're not going to lift at 80 what you lifted at 50, but now maybe you have a different intention on the other days of not taking a long walk or not picking up a dumbbell or something along those lines.
100%. And I think it's important to really think about, what kind of, what is the legacy of your health? I read that somewhere. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. I can't say where I got it, so I apologize. But I've heard, I hear people saying that sometimes, and I'm just like, you know what, that's it. What do you want to be remembered for? Do you want to be remembered of just being sitting there because you can't do anything? Or someone like my aunt that, like I said, she's going to outlive me. I tell her that all the time, and she just chuckles and she's like, oh no, honey, that's not how it's supposed to work. So because I can relate to that, and like I said, she's my goal. Like I want to be able to do all of those things in my late 80s and rely on no one. I mean, I am married. I'm hoping that my husband outlives me. My son hopefully get better. But I also don't want, them to have to feel like they've got to, I got to go get mom because she needs to do this, or, I need someone to dress me or give me, I don't want any of that. I don't want any of that. That's not the life I want to live. So we've got to journal what your vision is, think truly about your goals. And then at that point, do check-ins with yourself, whether it's a monthly check-in, or something along those lines. Every 3 months, are you making those steps towards your end goal, and that end goal being the time frame you think you're going to live? Just like when we balance money, right? We need to make sure we have enough money in our accounts in order to live without having to think about if we didn't. And then, so I think you need to think about your life the same way. And then on that thing, just commit to the small stuff. You don't have to go and commit to a full hour. And that's what I tell my clients now. I've always said that we've got people that have done quotes like a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So that's a Rick Ritchie quote. I will give credit to him because I know where that one came from. But it's one of those things that even if it's a 10-minute stretching routine that you do in the morning, or you go to a yoga class 3 or 4 times a week, or even just once a week, if you just need to start small. But in order to build a better you need to think about what are the steps to get there and then commit to those steps.
Well said, Wendy. You just got
Done.
make a decision and then follow through, I think is what you just said.
Future you starts now.
Future you starts now. And again, that might be an extreme example, thinking about getting to 80, getting to 90. But if you take this idea of setting your goals a year from now, 2 years from now, you do everything that you just said, Wendy, write them down, check in monthly, bi-monthly, and just see if you're on the right track. And if not, then make your adjustments, accommodate your situation and I don't say errors, but some of the speed bumps that you encountered, and make your adjustments. And I think that's what we do, Wendy, right? As personal trainers and strength coaches, is just, okay, not everything's linear, but you have to make those accommodations to where keeping that vision, keeping the eye on the horizon, and just stay on target. Oh, sorry, Star Wars reference there.
I know. Well, I'm glad that you went to the bookstore that day and you're like, we're going to talk about this, because like I said, we were able to share more stories and really try to bring something to the forefront that sometimes I don't think about. I just try to think about what I've got going on this week by looking at my calendar,
Right.
like how am I going to fit things in for myself? And so I think I need to look more long-term sometimes. And this was a good way to get started. So thanks, Ken, for bringing this up.
My pleasure, Wendy. And hopefully you, as a listener of Random Fit, got out of this episode what Wendy did, right? So just to give you a different perspective on how to set goals. So thank you for your time and listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, here on Random Fit. So if you like what you heard today, like, follow, subscribe, download, and share. If you like somebody enough to share this information, please do so. Give us a 5 out of 5 rating if possible. But more importantly, if there's something we can talk about on Random Fit in future episodes, let us know. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.